Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Monday, January 19th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. California's high-speed rail project was supposed to be a boon for cities looking to boost economic activity. But for Merced's up-and-coming downtown, that could be changing.
This station, it would be located about 4 miles southeast of downtown Merced.
Coming up, we'll learn more about the shifting priorities for rail officials. We'll have that conversation in just a moment.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Fresno State, providing short courses and activities for everyone 50 and better. Registration for the spring semester is now active, and more info is available at fresnostate.edu/OLLI. The Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, where learning never ends.
And now to our feature story. The high-speed rail promises to bring economic prosperity to valley communities, especially where stations are planned, like in Merced. Originally, the plan was to build a rail station downtown. That would be convenient for riders, but it would also benefit businesses and the city. More foot traffic means more dollars being spent and increased tax revenue. But pressure to finish this overdue and over-budget train has the rail authority considering other options, like moving the station outside of city limits, an idea that was recently presented to the City Council and Board of Supervisors. Victor Patton was at those meetings. Victor's the managing editor of our news partner, the Merced FOCUS, and the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. And he joins me today to break down city leaders' response to this proposal. Victor starts by giving us some background on the original idea for Merced's high-speed rail station.
This goes back many years. As we know, there was a bond measure that California voters passed in 2008 for high-speed rail. And Merced was envisioned as being this station in the downtown that was kind of really going to be in the middle of everything. I mean, it's the location of it there is kind of like just off one of the main drags in town. It's an area that city leaders have been wanting for a long time to bring investment to, bring, redevelopment to. So this was stationed beyond just being sort of a hub in the Central Valley. When I say hub, they also envision it as being a place where you would be able to catch your high-speed rail, you'd be able to catch your ACE train, you'd also be able to catch the Amtrak there. So they really envisioned this as being a place where it would be a transportation center that would also draw a great deal of business. Mm-hmm. They really envisioned this as a place that was going to reinvent Merced's downtown. And to be clear, Merced's downtown has been going through a lot of reinvention. If you go down Main Street, I mean, what are the main hotels there? The El Capitan has, went through a multi-million-dollar renovation, as did the Hotel Tioga. I mean, these are buildings going back to the 1920s. So there's really been kind of a renaissance happening in downtown Merced. High-speed rail is kind of seen as the next part of that. It was really going to bring Merced, forward in moving into the 21st century in terms of like the development of downtown Merced.
Sure. Well, now we're here today because those plans could be changing. So just last week, the chief of external affairs for the California High-Speed Rail Project spoke to the Merced City Council as well as the County Board of Supervisors. So what are they now proposing?
They are now proposing this station. It would be located about 4 miles southeast of downtown Merced, and in an area that's really kind of rural. If you drive by there, if you're driving north on 99 and you cross from Madera County into Merced, before you enter the city, there's this area where Mission Avenue crosses Highway 99. And if you look over to your left, there's kind of like a considerably empty area where they're envisioning putting this.
And it's unincorporated land.
That's right. It's unincorporated. This is county land.
Okay, a little different from the downtown Merced initial proposal. So what was the High-Speed Rail Authority's justification for suggesting this change?
Well, in August, they released this report, and this report had a bunch of alternatives to essentially save money on building out high-speed rail. Some of these alternatives, they had alternative routes, and some of these alternative routes bypassed Merced completely. If you look at some of the maps, they're looking at, going from Southern California, potentially right around Madera. They would go from Madera to Gilroy, instead of going from Bakersfield directly to Merced. And some of these alternatives were put forward as cost-saving measures.
Which, it's worth noting, the project is overdue and it's over budget. So that's kind of top of mind for a lot of folks is how are we finally going to complete the rail?
Yeah, they're trying to find ways to complete it, and they're trying to find ways to complete it less expensively. Yeah. So this has been put forward as an alternative that will save the state money. I mean, they think that they could save $1 billion by building it at this alternative location. There's different reasons for that. They've said some of the reasons have been, building downtown has a lot of challenges. For example, you're talking about building in the urban core, so that's going to have challenges to traffic, right? You're going to have to close off different streets, not only just streets, but main streets. Also, they've talked about, the properties that they have to acquire there and so forth. So they're looking at this as a less expensive alternative.
And less disruptive.
Less disruptive. Yes, that's what they've said.
Okay. So I do want to note, though, before we get into the reaction of city leaders, that isn't it written in the law that the authority is obligated to build the rail station in downtown Merced?
Correct. Yes. Under SB 198, not only is it have to be built in Merced, it specifically has to be built in downtown Merced. Now, that's interesting because in order to change that, the legislature will have to update that law to say that it would be built somewhere else because there's a difference between building in downtown Merced versus building at this other site.
That leads me to ask, how are city officials in Merced as well as Merced County officials responding to this proposal?
Well, it's interesting. There's a range of reactions. I think that many of the officials do recognize the complications of building downtown. But I think on the flip side of that, building in downtown Merced, this has been something that they've talked about for years. One of the members of the city council, council member Darren DuPont, he even said that, they've been talking about this since he was in high school, building in downtown. And when you go to, and they've had many meetings with the public over this, and you go to these meetings that High Speed Rail has, and they have these graphics with the renderings for what the downtown station is going to look like and how they've talked about how it's going to revolutionize downtown and do all of these different things. So the average Merced resident has been really kind of, brought along to think about, this is going to change downtown Merced in a big way. It's really going to bring a facelift to downtown Merced that people have never seen before. Now to kind of change that, I think that, some of the leaders probably to some extent, they feel like, well, it's better to have this station in the Southeast than nothing, right? Because you don't want to be left out of the equation. But I think that on some level, there's probably disappointment because Merced and the city of Merced and High Speed Rail have been partners for years in this idea of building in downtown Merced.
Yeah, it would certainly be a readjustment of expectations, not just for leadership, but for residents. What was the ultimate next step? Like, did the council members have to vote on this, or what did you witness when you attended those meetings?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because high-speed rail has this business plan that they're trying to deliver to the legislature by May, and they've said that they have a January 31st deadline that they're trying to meet to get the draft of that done. So at the Merced City Council this past Monday, they had several alternatives, and it was a range of alternatives that, they could have basically voted to say that this concept of the Southwest Station, that they essentially approve of the concept. Really, the vote that they did on Monday was to have more discussions with the authority about this and flush out the details, because, there are a lot of questions, and a lot of good questions, actually, about where exactly is this going to be? What is the infrastructure that's in place to support building a high-speed rail out there? Lots of questions that people still have.
I think it's also worth noting that the rail project actually lost a big chunk of funding from the federal government last year. That was $4 billion.
Correct.
Do you think that factors into the reasoning behind potentially moving the Merced station out of city limits?
Well, I don't know. I think that it's a much bigger picture than just Merced. I think in terms of the $4 billion, they're trying to get private investment to finish high-speed rail. To what degree they're going to be successful in getting that private investment is really going to make a big difference. The $4 billion were certainly a loss. Can the High-Speed Rail Authority forge the partnerships that are necessary with private investors to bring this to fruition? That remains to be seen. The authority just, and the CEO himself recently begun seeking those investors. But I think the private investments and partnerships are going to be key in terms of the vision to have this train go from Southern California to the Bay Area.
Victor Patton, managing editor with our news partner, the Merced FOCUS, and the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. Thank you so much for coming to the studios and breaking this down for us.
Okay, thank you.
And that is today's show. And just a heads up, tomorrow we will discuss the record low homicide rate in Fresno with Police Chief Mindy Casto. So stay tuned for that conversation. And don't forget to rate and review the podcast in your favorite podcast app. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
How does AI even work? Where does creativity come from? What's the secret to living longer? TED Radio Hour explores the biggest questions with some of the world's greatest thinkers. They will surprise, challenge, and even change you. Listen to NPR's TED Radio Hour wherever you get your podcasts.